Welcome to the Balanced Warrior podcast. I am Coach Paul Melella. I am here with
Coach Chris Berlow. Happy to
we're
see you.
so we're so grateful and happy for everyone to either be listening or watching in on this podcast show. This is a very spontaneous right now action. I have not only a good friend, a client I've watched and guided him the past over 10 years, brand new in the business to now what I would consider one of the elite producers, not only in his firm and agency, but in the industry. And what I respect about him is he's a top producer from a business perspective, an income perspective, but more importantly, he's an amazing husband, an amazing dad of 3 children. He focuses on his fitness, his health, his relationships, his integrity, his character. His standard is super high. He pours into his clients and his team like I've never seen before. And there's just constant, consistent growth in multidimensional success. And I'm just really grateful to have Mr. Andrew Guyton on our show today for a quick powwow of value bombs. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yep.
So how long have we known each other?
I think we've known each other. It's got to be 12 years at this point. We're dating all the way back to when I first started in the business. And, we first met you when you came out to the agency.
Yeah. And so what I'm really impressed about is some of the things that we've taught and we've worked on. And what I want to share with the audience, certain practices that you've either learned, implement, and still practice today that are proven for you to be successful, not just in business, but the other life philosophies that you've been implementing into your personal professional life to create this philosophy that we all call multidimensional success.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, let's just share, with your permission, just kind of share with the audience quickly, like your story, personally, professionally, so they get to know who you are, where you're from, what you've built. And then we could dive into some of the value bombs that you can hopefully share with the audience on just not only business success, but also life success.
Yeah. How to build a successful life. Yeah.
Sure. So, I started my practice, had to be about 13, 14 years ago at this point. And I grew up around this business, as you guys both know. My dad, Joe, he's been in the business my entire life. So I was aware of, what the business was all about. But when I came, out of college and I was working at another company in corporate America, which really wasn't my ball of wax, I went to my old man and I said, "Hey, I'm going to come join the family business." And he said, "That sounds great. You can join the business. You cannot join my business. Go start your own and we'll find out if you're any good." Which I always tell people, as the middle child, part of me was kind of wondering if this guy even likes me or not. But it ended up being very, very good advice. I started my practice when I was living in Boston. I had just at the time met my now wife, Jen. And at that point, there was, no kids, no other real commitments. It was, you could work all the time and there was nothing wrong with that. And one of the wonderful things about this business is it can be a lifestyle business as well. So you can be working, quote unquote, and not be at a cubicle, working, which is great. So began my practice there. It ramped up pretty quick, found success early, which was great. High activity, just talking to as many people and just trying to help as many people as possible. And then started to hit different phases of life. We got married. We're very lucky, found out, a month after we got married that we were having our first one, James, who's now 10. And 3 kids right in a row after that. They're all 16 months apart, which is fantastic. But that was the first big shift in life. You go from not having a bunch of commitments, all of a sudden you have, kids at home, you have a spouse at home, and you can't be in the office, 12 hours a day anymore, because you don't want to miss out on those little moments of life. And then as they got a little bit older and they started doing sports, I also didn't want to miss out on those moments in life either. So, I coach a lot of their sports, which is great. And I get to spend a ton of time with them. And I've been able to continuously grow my practice and scale my practice. I started initially, back in the, non-married days, just a solo producer, no admins. As my practice grew and, family commitments started to be there, got my first admin, which was great. And she's fantastic. She's actually been in the business longer than I have. She was one of my dad's admins. And, at the point where Joe and I looked at possibly combining our practices, we decided that wasn't a good idea because our work styles were so different. So that's how we ended up kind of splitting up the admins as well. And then as that continued to grow, I always witnessed my dad as a one-man show, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I grew up playing sports. I wanted to be on a team. I wanted to have my own team of advisors. So I started building out a team. I took on my first protege in 2019. Perfect timing, right before COVID, which was a real treat. And then from there, we've grown to 4 advisors, 2 full-time admin, which is really fantastic. We'll likely add another one here at some point on the advisor side and potentially the admin side. And that triggered a lot of different other business issues or challenges that we could go after. And one of them came down to branding. For my the majority of my business career, it was just the Guyton Group. It was our last name, because it was my dad and I, and even though we ran separate practices, people just knew us by our last name. That was our brand. But as I started bringing on new advisors, their last name wasn't Guyton anymore. So I wanted to make it more of an actual entity versus just something about a family business. So we rebranded to Forge Financial in 2023, which, Paul's known me for a long time. Forge stuck with me. It was a little untraditional for my industry. A lot of people, choose mountains and peaks and ascension or Latin words or whatever it may be. I wanted something that I felt was really strong, that people could latch onto, because when you forge something, you work on it, and you work on it, so that when you need it, it doesn't break. And that's what, planning, that's what life's all about.
That came out on a coaching call. I remember vividly being in that conversation. I was actually in New York in the office in Shrub Oak in New York, and that came about. And I was very, very excited to be a part of that process. There's a go ahead.
No, I love like branding or brands or names that have true meaning, right? And that you could actually, I'm sure, when you're talking to people, you're sharing that story and what it means, which in your open talk, and I think that just adds to the, the power and the beauty of what you're doing. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
So Andrew, there's a couple things I wanted to ask you. One was there's a driving force. So you've created not only a successful process, but scalable business with the team that was much different than your dad's, right? And one of the driving forces, if I remember correctly, is that in a weird way, I call it having not like a I'll prove you wrong or prove you right or a subconscious villain. Like I want to, battle against this, this other force. Like I was always driven I love my dad, but I want to prove, maybe to myself that I can be an entrepreneur and have it all, right? Like that was my dad's belief was, if he opened up a business, he wouldn't be around. He wouldn't do this. I had that driving force before I was a parent. Then it shifted, right? My driving force became, really raising the standard for my kids. But early on in your career, I believe there was a driving force to, let people know, hey, I'm building this on my own. I don't need my dad's help. He was very respected in the industry, very respected in your firm. For years, he was the #1 advisor. Now, I was at your awards banquet in Boston, and you got all these, you and my other client in front of yours, Jan, were just like crushing it. But can you just talk about back then that driving intentional force about just building something on your own? What was that fire for you and why?
Yeah, so like I said, I grew up playing a lot of sports. I'm a very competitive guy, and I was very lucky to have a role model in my dad in the business, in that if I had a question at 11 o'clock at night, I could call him and ask it to him. And like you said, he's, so well established, so well respected in this industry, that was really an advantage for me to be able to bounce ideas off of people. There was always this misconception, and people would say to me, hey, oh, it must be great. You get to do all this work, you and your dad. And that it used to actually bother me because I never wanted people to think that I was riding his coattails. And even to this day, I was just out in a conference in San Diego, and someone said to me, oh, well, I just always assumed that you worked with your dad. And it bothered me, not because I don't want to work with him. Like, that's great. I love that we're in the same office. I see him every single day. It is fantastic. It's made our relationship way better. It's just, there's only good things that have ever come from it. But I wanted to stand on my own. I never wanted there to be this impression that there were any handouts or anything like that, because there weren't. You know, his message of go start your own business and see if you're any good at it was not only to make sure that it was for me, so that I didn't do something that didn't work out well. It was a very good, you know, parenting move by him, because he had grown up around family businesses in Pennsylvania. He had seen siblings come in and out. But the side piece to that was, once I was up and running, you got to a point where it was like, okay, now we're almost like friendly competition for each other, which is great. So we actually would drive each other to be better. And he had said to me many times that, you know, he was inspired and reinvigorated to see some of the things that I was doing. And even to this day, you know, I'm very process driven. He latches on to a lot of the things that I'm doing. So we've actually had an opportunity to make each other better, which is really kind of cool. But that driving force for me was, you know, I wanted to be remembered in my own light. I said this in front of a group of about 70 people. Right after my dad had spoke one day, I got up and had the opportunity to say something. And I told everyone that I wanted people to say, hey, Joe Guyton was really good, but boy, Andrew was even better, you know? And we always joke about that because it's all done in, you know, out of love and friendliness. And he always says to me, you know what, I hope they do say that, which I think is kind of cool.
That's right. I respect both your dad and you.
Yeah.
Him setting that standard, going, hey, no handouts, son. Go out and go out and do it yourself, which I respect. I think there's a huge entitlement mindset, you know, in the younger generation, which you obviously didn't have. And look what it did for you. Like, it inspired you to push, whether it was a good or a bad, you know, frequency, you know, but it was driven. Like my coach that I'm working with now, we talked about what's your burn. You know, I call that your driving force, like what's driving you. And I think in seasons, it could evolve and shift, right? You know, once you get to a certain, you know, point where you're like, man, I proved this. Now what's my driving force? You talked about scaling, and when you got to a certain point, you know, you and I talked about this concept of a chess set, right? We have a king and a queen, front stage, backstage, and I look at teams just like that, right? And we talked about this in our coaching. And can you just share, at one point, where were you, you know, in your business where you're like, listen, I need to delegate some stuff off my plate, focus on my unique talents, and just talk about how now you've built up this team, and you have again, I don't want to sound sexist, but queen doesn't have to be a female. It's someone in the backstage, right? You know, the king and the queen, and then you have a bishop on the backstage and a bishop on the front stage, and you know, you're building out this army of team members. Can you just talk a little bit about how you've been scaling over the years and when that shifted for you?
Yeah. So when I first started, I mean, you're the business owner, you're the admin, you're HR, you're IT. You, as any business owner, when you first start, you are everything. You wear every single one of those hats. So my week used to look like, hey, I will see clients whenever I can. And when clients don't want to be seen, you know, typically late at night, very early in the morning on weekends, that's when all my admin time was. So it was nothing for me to be, you know, sitting around, you know, in my condo at the time at 10, 11 o'clock at night, doing admin work, prepping emails, you know, doing case design, whatever it may be, just so that during the true business hours, I could be in front of clients. I do think the biggest trigger for that was the family dynamic, because once you start having a family, whether it's, you know, just your spouse or, you know, kids get introduced in there, you don't want to miss those things. So you can't be, you know, working away at, you know, 6, 7 o'clock at night. You can't be doing things at 6 o'clock in the morning when you have, you know, an infant child who's waking up at all hours of the night. It's not a recipe for success anymore. So that was the big trigger of, all right, there are now things that I have established my business well enough that I can offload those. What are the things that I'm going to offload so that I can be in my highest and best use in front of clients, building relationships, doing the advising for their plan, and what is some of the back office work, like you said, that I can unload that really takes up a lot of time, and it's not time that I should be, you know, spending my time on, when I could, you know, be keeping myself in more balance by being with, you know, family, kids, and not missing those moments that you will never ever get back. You know, and it's one thing that I always share with clients now who are having, you know, kids for the first time. from 0 to 10, James turned 10 back in April. I cannot believe how quickly that went. It seemed like, 2 weeks ago, I was holding him in the palm of my hand. Now he's like, 5 feet tall, 100 pounds, and he's arguing with me all the time. And it's a lot of fun, but just like that, so you can't walk by that. And that's the business scaling piece, because I think in some respects it's hard to let some of those things go because you have a way that you want to do them. But you have to, if you're going to be successful, you have to let them go.
Can you pivot a little bit towards when you shifted your seasons of life, right? From being married as a husband and as a parent, how did you, separate and divide and time block, where you always in the back of your mind, we've been seeding the life philosophy of multi-dimensional success. What were some of the takeaways or things that you learned, implemented, and still today apply that helped create that in your professional and personal world?
So it's funny, ever since I first started, one of my mentors, we'll call him, told me that I had to use time blocking, and I never did it because I was like, this will never work, and then after years of coaching with you, Paul, you told me you got to do time blocking, and probably the 15th time I heard it, I was like, all right, fine, I'll try time blocking just so I can prove to all these guys it's not going to work, right? Guess what? It works really freaking well, so I live by my calendar now, and one of the things that allows me to do that is I have tracked everything that happens in my business at a pretty granular level for years, to the point where I know how many meetings I have, I know how many hours they go for, I know what every single funnel looks like, I know where people come from, et cetera, et cetera. It is a data-driven business for me, which is rare in my profession, I think. And when I have things in life happening, the different seasons. So right now, I'm coaching 3 different flag football teams. We have kids going in 9 different directions in sports. You have family commitments, you have client commitments, you have, you name it, all over the place. I will block off my calendar, and then I know, because of all the data that I've kept, if I have a 3-day work week, exactly what I need to cram into those 3 days. So that allows me to go ahead and block in there, hey, you know what? I got 3 days to work. I'm going to put 15 meetings in there. That's going to leave me, 3 hours of fluff time across those 3 business days. Here are the things that I need to get done in those 3 hours of fluff time. So that's a real example of what happened this week, because we had Memorial Day on Monday. Today I'm doing prep for the golf tournament that I run for veterans on next Monday. So I had 3 days in there. We ended up having 17 meetings in 3 days, and nothing got put to the side. Everything is still up and running because I have the support staff in place that I can unload things to them. We have our processes so that everyone else is working in the background. I'm not getting interrupted because, hey, I got a quick question. Everything's just happening back there, and no one's getting left at the wayside. No balls are getting dropped, which is huge. And that'll happen again next week. And I already know it's going to happen again next week because I have my calendar blocked. I looked ahead and I planned it all out. So that allows me to stay on track. It allows me to hit my goals. It allows me to work through different times of the year. Paul knows this about me. In the fall, I don't like to work as much because I like to sit in my tree stand and go hunting. And that's something that, you can't be talking on the phone in the middle of the woods. So the work dynamic is a little different then than it is in January, when there's just not as much going on. And I have more days during the week to work. So it ebbs and flows. But I think the underlying processes, the data, and then the support that I've built allows me to function and adapt depending on what's happening at different times in my life.
So Andrew, what's the first thing that goes in your calendar?
First thing that goes in my calendar is all the kids' practices, actually.
Okay. Second thing.
So first thing's all the kids' practices, all the holidays, kids' practices. It's actually the family stuff that goes in there first. Okay. That wasn't always the case. I will admit that it wasn't always the case. At first, it was, hey, I gotta keep the business rolling. So a lot of business stuff would go in there first. But now it's the family stuff first. And with automatic booking services and stuff like that, like bookings through Outlook and things. As long as I block my calendar in there, I now know family time is sacred, which is great. Yep, you got it. So it's that stuff first. A lot of the personal stuff that I do. So if I'm, working out, or if I, whatever it needs to be done, That stuff usually happens outside of business hours anyway. I've built it that way, so I don't get distracted. That's with a lot of help from Paul and a lot of beating me over the head with that. And then it's the client stuff is next, and the free time, which is important for me. The free time a lot of times corresponds with the kid stuff because if I'm being completely honest, my free time, I'm happy to spend it with my family, and even if I'm coaching and I'm with my kids and I'm coaching, a lot of the kids I coach are our friends' kids and stuff too. That's a lot of fun for me. I enjoy that thoroughly, and a lot of times the other parents are hanging around, so we're all having a blast with that anyway. So that's usually the cadence of what's in the calendar.
I think that's what's really important for everybody who's listening to understand is that you're taking care of putting the oxygen mask on yourself before you're putting it even on for your clients and your business, which I think is really important for everybody to understand. I think sometimes people get their priorities a little mixed up. Right?
Well, listen, yeah, and I want to be respectful too of clients' time, right? I mean, to me, the worst thing the thing that gives me the biggest knot in my stomach is when I have to reschedule a meeting, even if it's like, oh my gosh, guys, I got like the flu. Or it's like, hey, you know what? There's a kid thing I can't miss. It's still, I love all my clients. It breaks my heart when I have to shift my calendar for a client because I don't want to inconvenience them. So I'm very militant of that because that's something I like to avoid. Is I don't like the unpleasantry of sending someone an email that I have to move a meeting. And a lot of times it's funny they don't mind because they get it, but I still feel bad. I want to be there for them.
Yeah. Wow. Well. What do you think, going back to the whole scaling, I think that's a lot of thing that especially in your industry, that people struggle with, right? So what suggestions would you have? Again, I know a lot of my clients, that's a lot of our conversations, protege, scaling, growing, building a team. What do you think are like the golden nuggets or the best practices that you've learned, or what are some mistakes you've made that you've learned from that you will not do again? I think that would be a valuable takeaway for everybody.
So I think, again, growing up around this business and, this isn't specific to any, advisor, but I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of advisors over the course of my life. And even when, now when I'm going out to, large conferences and advisors are there, you feel like you've known some of these people for a long time, so you can ask them questions that maybe other people haven't. I think the thing that I would, the nugget of advice I would give to younger advisors who are looking to scale is a lot of times when people are scaling, they're thinking about new people only, right? How do I add more new clients? And when your focus is only on new clients, you lose track of the clients who helped you get to where you are. And at the end of the day, if you're going to do a good job scaling, I think you need to make sure that you first scale your service business so you can continue to take care of and continue to keep the promises that you gave all the clients that got you to where you are. And once they're well taken care of and you have processes in place to make sure you don't miss anything for them, then you can work on scaling with new clients. And the interesting thing is a lot of people's focus is always on the new clients, but if you put your focus and pour your energy into your old clients and the ones that, again, have been with you for a long time and who even maybe took a flyer on you when you first started, you're going to grow with new clients really fast because they're going to know how much you love them and how much you appreciate them. And they're going to, introduce you to people and help you keep growing your business versus, you actually having to go out and maybe pound the pavement and do networking and things like that, which, eats into, the time that you have to take care of clients or be with your family.
I think that's really important because a lot of times, many industries, when they get them in the door, they're like, oh, I need the next one. I need the next one. I need the next one. But I agree. I think we all believe in that philosophy. Take care of the people you have, do a better job with them, and then the growth will happen generically.
Yep. And listen, it's like, let them know how much you love them. It's one of those things that, I'm in a relationship business and, not everyone, who's listening to this might be an advisor, but I'm in a relationship business. I want to keep people around because I have enjoyed everything that I've gotten to do with them so far. It's fun for me to see what's happened in their lives, to hear about what's next. And I want to see that whole journey for them. So I don't want there to be a crack in my servicing model because I don't want to miss out on what the future might have for some of these folks.
I think any business is a relationship business, unless you're an analyst behind the computer and that's all you do for 8 hours. But any business, whether it be, financial services, insurance, whatever. It's all people. It's a people business, right?
Mm-hmm. You got it.
It's all about relationships.
The concept that I'm sure Andrew and I spoke about in the past is, I always say, the sale's made after the sale.
Yes.
All three of us, how hard did we work to get our wives to say, I do? You know what I mean? Like, that was.
I'd like to say my wife did more work than me, but it's okay.
Maybe. But anyway, we worked hard on that prospect to get them to commit and to enroll, into this relationship, right? And then my whole philosophy is, if you ignored your wife, you ignored your kids, they're not going to feel loved, right? And attention equals love. And I said this very facetiously to somebody this week. I'm like, if you don't pay attention to your clients and you don't service them, someone else is going to go out of their way to win over their business.
Yeah.
It's just that simple, and so, I hear me talk about, like, do not be a product pusher, close a product sale and then your client sits on the shelf, and until your pipeline runs dry. And then all of a sudden you're reactive and like, oh man, why is this guy so-and-so reaching out to me? The last time he reached out to me a year, 2 years ago, he sold me a product, and that drives me absolutely insane. And so what I'm hearing, before you even go to that next step, is you're making sure you're servicing the people that you've established, and you build out an amazing relationship building process, right? And once you do that, I also believe, right, we've done this math, Andrew, once someone starts accumulating some clients, and you and I talk about, we call it QCMs, quarterly, right? Quarterly calibration meetings. Even at someone's got 100 clients or 100 people they've onboarded, and you divide that over a 12-week cycle, that's 12 people a week you should be touching base with and keeping that relationship strong. And that, to me, is a business model. It's a structured system. And that's what he's done. He's got to a certain level where he was cycling out a process, meeting his clients on a routine system. And then he goes, oh my goodness, I cannot sustain this many clients on their QCMs. Let me take a protege. Let me take another advisor. Let me teach him or her on how to handle, this service-based model. And then I will then start working on, and that's what Andrew did. He started elevating the market, and he didn't neglect his existing clients.
Right.
He kept relationships. And then all of a sudden he started going up market, and he started maximizing his time with the higher level clients or avatars. And I love about him is, where he shows up in his cowboy boots, his Raptor, you know what I mean? And he's so relatable, man. He's not intimidated. He's not a suit, as I call everybody. Like, I used to call you all suits. I have to be a suit too when I do a presentation, but this is pretty much how I roll, for the most, unless my shirt's off outside on coaching calls. But that's what I love about him, is he kept that service-based relationship model.
I love the idea that you scaled within before you went to the outside. And I think that is a real big takeaway. You got to scale within first, scale inside first, and then to take care of what you have. That's a very, very valuable insight that I don't think a lot of people look at.
And we're going to be mindful on your time, Andrew. This is going to be more of a rip it and ship it interview podcast, so I'm going to be respectful to that. But talk quickly about what have been some of the mindset principles that you've been using since you've been in the industry, that you still feel that that's a foundational principle that helped you break through some barriers, and still to this day that you're applying. If you had to give the audience some value bombs on the mindset strategies that helped you take the action, what are some of the things that really helped you develop the mindset, nurture and protect it?
Yeah. So, a lot of this came from, our coaching together. And one of the things that I'm very diligent with, and it almost sounds kind of cheesy sometimes when you say it to people, but it's the practicing of, being grateful, practicing gratitude with things. Because even when, sometimes it feels like things are going wrong, and I tell guys on my team, like, hey, if you feel like you've hit skid row and things are going wrong, you remember that everything reverts back to an average, at the end of the day. So, practicing gratitude and, thinking about how grateful you are for clients, family, time, time with kids, your health, just anything out there can get you out of, looking at those negative things that are going on in life that, really at the end of the day, you probably have no control over. Because if you did have control over them, you would just fix them right away. But you probably have no control over them, and it's something that you just have to live through a little bit. And if you can focus on the positives, you're going to get out of it a lot quicker versus wallowing in it and maybe not seeing a solution. And a good one, for a lot of advisors. I speak to young advisors. A lot of times it's, oh my gosh, I'm in this rut where I have no one to talk to. And you go back to that service model. It's like, well, do you have clients that you're really grateful for, that you have a really good relationship with? Yeah, it's like, call them up, take them to lunch. I think you'll find out, A, how much they appreciate you, and B, how many people they're probably willing to share you with. They just may not know that they can share you. So I think looking for things to be grateful for, and then just staying focused on yourself. Doing the things that you can control on a daily basis is what's going to lead to your success. If you focus on external factors that you have no control over and you can't change, you're just spinning your wheels. So do the things that you can control and do the things that mean the most to you, that get you energized, and you'll find yourself in a good spot.
Great value bomb, my friend. With a big smile on my face, because I'm just so proud of you, who you've become, who you've consistently evolved to be. Again, not as a top advisor and producer and leader within your agency and team, but again, more importantly, as a husband and as a dad, and you're raising a standard for your family. And I know for a fact that that's your new driving force, is your children.
And the industry. I think you raised the bar pretty high, and you set a wonderful example. And I believe like the future leaders like yourself and the others are just setting a whole different precedence than what was there before.
Amen.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
Well, I know you're busy. I want to thank you so much for jumping on and sharing your story and your value bombs to the audience. I'm sure there's a lot of takeaways for anyone in any industry and any business. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Coach Chris. Thank you again, Andrew Guyton. I appreciate you, man. Have a blessed week.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you both.
Yes, wonderful.